The name of this show is Living Wisdom, and I'm Patty Paul. Today I have, once again, my friend Steve Parrish as a guest. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you.
And for the audience to know that you'll be channeling Elanor very shortly. And Elanor is going to be speaking about some topics that are especially important to us. So I'm going to invite you to go right away into your channeling process. As you do that, the credits will roll. When we come back, we'll wait a few minutes if necessary for Elanor to be with us. Elanor is almost with us.
Oh yes, we are here.
Hello, Elanor.
I'm delighted to be back indeed.
And welcome again. Today, I'd like you to share your wisdom and your insights on a subject that I think is of great interest to us, human beings, and certainly to me. A few months ago, I talked to you personally about this beautiful little statuette of Buddha that I own. It has such meaning to me. It's made out of labradorite, a beautiful iridescent mineral. And you had such interesting things to talk about the energy of the Buddha consciousness. So, with that, I invite you to talk about Buddha consciousness and Christ consciousness. We'll start off with that.
All right. Delighted. Let's see. Buddha and Christ were mapmakers of their age, much the way you are a mapmaker of your age. They were on the cutting edge, if you will, of seeking spirituality, seeking a connectedness to God, Goddess, all that is, we would say. God in some references and some frameworks. Goddess in other frameworks. It doesn't really matter which words you put to it. It was the idea of the touching of that energy, of that resonance, the opening of the heart. Now, Buddha and Christ went about it in very different ways, if you will. This may sound somewhat familiar to you. In that sense, the Christ consciousness is more about humanity touching divinity and opening the space for the divine to come directly into the physical, to touch your heart, to fill you in that sense. Many people having that experience through working with the teachings of the Christ and working with Christ consciousness. The Buddha consciousness, somewhat more aligned along the parameter, if you will, of humanity growing, stretching to reach divinity. The Buddha consciousness teaching multiple lifetimes, and through the many lifetimes, the many learning experiences, each time you become more and more enlightened, what they call it. Enlightenment meaning more and more and more consciously aware of the parts of you that are beyond the physical in that sense. Ultimately, once reaching Buddha consciousness, there is truly, literally the experience of being able to step in and out of physical reality. And as you study it in that sense, there are many Buddhas in the consciousness in that sense. There are many people, many individual physical people who have gone through that transition process and reached a level of what's called Buddha consciousness, and they often choose to come back and work with others in the physical plane. And there's a lot of literature in that sense, an experience of people having them come back, sensing, working with a Buddha who can step in and out of physicality. Very magically in that sense by modern terms. That if you experienced that, you'd, well, at first you might get scared and run away. But in that sense, allowing yourself to be interacted with, in that sense, with a being that literally can step in and out of physicality. The Christ consciousness, in that sense, those teachings, although there's a similarity of Jesus the Christ in that sense, the man himself, who reached a level of enlightenment, who reached a level of being touched by the divine and being willing to stand up and be visibly a magician of his age, a teacher, a healer. So many of the things that you in the New Age talk about being. In his time, in that sense, it wasn't as widespread. It was quite against consensus to stand up and say, this is who I am and this is what I do. And in that sense, knowing even the concept of that you have a negative ego, you have a martyr, and going through, quote unquote, a martyr's experience of literally being nailed onto a cross, and doing so consciously, doing so with intent to demonstrate that even martyrhood can be transcended.
Oh.
And so the quote unquote coming back in that sense, similar to the Buddha of stepping in and out of physical reality as Christ allowed himself to reanimate a physical form. Once again to touch people, to teach them, to heal, to teach them. You can transcend the physical. Life itself is everlasting, literally. It reaches beyond the physical. It stretches beyond the doorway of death, the barrier that so many of you are so afraid of, as we've talked of before. Mm-hmm. They made maps. Watch the way you personally make maps, and many of the people you work with make maps. The maps that they made are not maps in a physical sense. And part of what happens with religion in that sense, and we realize we'll talk a little delicately here in that sense, we don't want to offend anyone. But what religion often tries to do is take the living spirit, the living energy of the maps made by Christ or the maps made by Buddha, and to catch hold of it. And unfortunately, once caught, what often happens is the chauvinism comes in, the patriarchal society views in that sense come in, and power gets involved, politics gets involved, and they take this beautiful living spirit and they start squishing it into little boxes and saying, well, if you want to have what Christ had, then you've got to come to me. If you want to have what Buddha had, then you have to study with me. If you look at the teachings of Christ or Buddha, neither one of them would ever say anything of the kind in that sense. And we're not diminishing religion. It served humanity wonderfully in that sense. And there are many people within religious orders in that sense that very much are attached to that living spirit and do teach it. There have been times in your past especially when it was so twisted that terrible, horrible things were done in the name of these maps. And these maps, the Crusades, the Inquisition, there's some really ugly stuff in that sense, had nothing to do with that living, breathing spirit, other than that it was the dark shadow of the spirit itself. Individuals throughout time have had the ability to reach and stretch and grab and touch that spirit in that sense. And now, in your world, you are reaching a point of evolution of your very species where everyone, every single human on your planet has the ability. They may not be following it yet, they may not be choosing it, but they have the ability. But so many are choosing to reach and stretch and touch the divine. Touch what's outside of, quote unquote, the physical world, and to allow themselves to be touched by it, to develop their spirituality, spirit, you, inside, spirit-uality, into your reality, drawing spirit, the living, breathing spirit of God, Goddess, and letting it lift your consciousness, raise your resonance, so that you can stand in a place where your foundation is made up of your true value, is made up of genuine responsibility. And that's the foundation you stand on. And from there, reaching heavenward, drawing the Spirit, drawing the magic, learning the tools and the techniques to make maps of your own. Not maps that are going to turn into religions. Not maps that you grab somebody and say, okay, Bob, here's my map and you better follow it.
I've tried that. That doesn't work at all.
Not at all effective
Not at all.
indeed. But maps in the sense of you're going first. You're standing up and becoming a leader. You personally, Paddy, part of what you are physically, consciously doing is the show that you're doing now. Right here, right now. Part of making a map. Leaving the opening, the space for someone to reach and touch and expand their consciousness. And doing it from a place of love and compassion. Not just the words, love and compassion, but the actual honest feeling, experience, paradigm of love and compassion. And it changes your world. Literally. At the physical level, it alters what happens here. When you are willing to stand on the foundation of the idea that you are loved 100% by God, Goddess, all that is. And that every single person on your planet is loved 100% by God, Goddess, all that is. Regardless of what they're doing, their beingness, their who they are-ness. It is a gift from the divine. When you can touch that, when you can let it be real, you experience the beginning of what equates to Buddha consciousness or Christ consciousness. And it fills you and it lifts you. And from that place you can come with the eyes of true love and compassion, so that when someone is in your reality, when you can stand with the eyes of love and compassion, with the eyes of your wholeness, with the eyes of your realness, you can then look at the person next to you and you can see their value. You can know that that person, no matter what they are doing right now, innately, God, Goddess loves them exactly the way they are. Their who they are-ness, their realness, their wholeness. Now many times in your physical world, what you're doing, how you're living, is not in alignment with that foundation of value. But when you can find yours, when you can stand in your value, when you bring that love and compassion to your interpersonal relationships, then when someone is not in alignment with their value, you can still see that value. You can touch that value. You can call that resonance forth in them. And you can be free to talk to them about what they are doing from a place of love and compassion instead of judgment, instead of control, instead of they're broken and I got to fix them, instead of many of the agendas that people tend to bring. And in that sense, Buddha consciousness and Christ consciousness, both of them, maps of their age. And you know, when Christ was wandering around, he was the New Age movement of his time, of his day. Literally. They didn't use those particular words, but the concept was there. When Buddha reached the level of sitting under a tree and experiencing the wondrous joy of life, knowing that everything he needed, he would create. He was the New Age movement of his time. He was the new spirituality. He wasn't alone, nor was Christ in that sense. There were many who listened, there were many who learned, there were many who touched the divine. Various forms, various means of getting there that doesn't matter so much. Which trail you follow, essentially you're really going to create your own. but to understand in those times it was more rare. It was more rarefied. There were not that many people who were honestly brave enough to take the personal risk of exploring their own value, of exploring their own realness, of standing up against what was consensus and saying it doesn't have to be that way. Well, the difference now in that sense, in your time, in your age, is there, rather than being single individuals who are going to do that, that will then end up being a religion, and someday later, 10,000 years from now, they'll talk about Paddy Paul consciousness. It's much more widespread in that sense. And that's the difference, the evolutionary difference. They were making maps, singular individuals, having major impact. And all through history there have been individuals, some remembered, some not. There have been individuals who are willing to go beyond the consensus, to go beyond, to become exceptional. Not just to know that there are other worlds and other realms, that there is a divine to be touched, but to go and touch it. Well, the difference now is that there's so many of you that your hearts have been touched. You feel the yearning, you feel the longing, and you're reaching, each in your own beautiful, unique way, reaching to touch the divine, reaching to develop your spirituality, your personal relationship with Christ consciousness or Buddha consciousness or your own consciousness, whatever words you want to put on it, to touch and be lifted into that sense of value, and to bring that love and compassion and actively, consciously put it into your physical world, and it literally changes your world. And that is now a step of evolution of everybody on your planet. Some far more consciously, some the mapmakers, some very much on that leading edge, on the cutting edge, going out there, being the first, but others will follow. And out of the power, the resonance of touching dominion, an intersection of the physical and the non-physical, a way of taking the limitless resource that's available beyond the physical and allowing yourself to ground it into the physical in a way that allows your world to become so much less about barriers and boundaries and limitations. And you can change your very consciousness to where your living, breathing, daily experience is one filled with bounty, filled with joy, filled with wonder, filled with juice in that sense. And so much of what in your world now are unsolvable problems, they are not going to be solved through the old system. They are not going to be solved through chauvinism, through lack and limitation. They're going to be resolved by individuals like yourself and like so many of you who are watching. And your incredible willingness to be and to become more of who you are. It is beautiful. It is wondrous to be a part of that beauty. It changes lives, and eventually it changes communities, and eventually it changes your entire world, your entire planet.
What a hopeful message woven through your words.
Indeed. There is hope. There
Yes.
is grand hope.
Yeah, that's one message that would be so wonderful if more people could hear that, the hope.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
And more than hear it, be touched by it, be lifted by it, allow it to be a light,
Mm-hmm.
a spark of enlightenment, a light in their mind, a light in their heart, so their mind and their heart can work together to reach, to stretch, to grow, to change, to respond to your world with genuine love, with genuine compassion, flows out of you because it is an expression of who you are. Not in a box, not in a form, not in a picture that this is what I have to live up to, so I'm going to try and be loving. That doesn't work very well. But to honestly stand on the platform of your value and feel your love and feel that energy and touch the divine. And to know that the divine wants to touch you. God, Goddess wants to have a relationship with you. They are filled with love and compassion to overflowing. They have limitless supply, and they're more than happy to share it. Unfortunately, there have been twists and taints and turns in that sense. There has been a lot of chauvinism that's gotten woven into what was called spirituality. A great deal of shame, a great deal of guilt, a great deal of blame, a great deal of negative accountability. And so many people caught in that trap in that sense, wandering around basically secretly afraid that God is some old man with a white beard sitting on the cloud right out there staring at your genitals and what you do with them. Or keeping a report card, so that when you die and go to the pearly gates, they're going to pull out that long list and go, oh, sorry, Patty. You know, back there on June 3rd in 1992, you made this mistake. You're out of here.
See if we're naughty or nice.
Yeah. And it's absolutely untrue and unreal. It comes from a place inside of you that wants to make God, Goddess be mommy and daddy. Mm-hmm. And they are not mommy and daddy. Never were, never will be. So many people holding the big, even people who are very conscious and they understand about taking deeper levels of real responsibility, still holding it. That when I finish the lifetime, then I get to go to heaven where I never have to be responsible again. And it is absolutely not so. When you transit the physical world once and for all, not only are you not responsible, you're going to be more responsible than ever. Now, we're talking about real responsibility, juicy, alive responsibility. The willingness to truly create virtually instantaneously, to be so responsible for knowing what's in your raw materials, what you are actually made up of, and for creating reality based on genuine love, genuine compassion, because it's yours and because you know you have it in abundance, and so you spread it around, and you do so responsibly. Touching yourself and others, touching your world, changing it, working your magic, consciously claiming your power and putting it into use, and knowing that you have support in doing that. There are co-creators who will work with you. They will not do it for you.
Let's talk a little bit about that. We have just about 3.5 minutes left.
All right.
Those co-creators.
In that sense, you could think of Buddha and Christ as available co-creators. And they are absolutely available. And they are a level of consciousness, genuine consciousness. They once were physical, each of them. They now are non-physical, but they are still conscious. In that sense, we are conscious. We have never been physical, but we come to the physical this way, precisely for this reason, to help, to touch, to change, to be a part of the wondrous experiment you're doing here. And both Christ consciousness, and Buddha consciousness, not just the parameters that are put out by the Buddhist religion or by the Christian religion, and we're not diminishing those at all, but the consciousness is alive and real and absolutely willing to work with you as long as you're willing to stand up and be genuinely responsible. They won't do it for you in that sense. You can't say, okay, God, move my big toe. And a lot of people have that experience. They touch the resonance.
Mm-hmm.
And they're filled with the Spirit. But they don't take the responsibility for continuing, in that sense, the touch. They want then, because I'm now filled with the Spirit and I want to do good work, I hand my responsibility over to Christ consciousness, and I tell myself, it goes along the lines of, okay, Christ consciousness, you need to tell me what to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so many people, unfortunately, when they go there, the only place that road leads is to a disenfranchisement, a loss of that Spirit, and a terrible pain that follows.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be that way. The key there is responsibility, being willing to respond, being willing to be responsible for continuing the dialogue, if you will, continuing the relationship.
Once again, we've run out of time all too soon, Elanor, but thank you so much for being with us. I also want to thank the audience for their attention today. And again, the name of the show is Living Wisdom. This is Patty Paul saying goodbye until the next time.